So, for an average township family, how much do you think um, this transfer fees or the legal costs, attached to transferring a house?
Well, hold on. This is we haven't even got to the transfer yet.
Mm.
This is simply the legal process of managing the estate, and it said it should go to this person.
Okay.
Now,
So let's start from the time where you have to administer such an estate to the transfer.
okay.
On average, how much would a family or a person spend to fully complete the process?
Well, it depends on
Both processes.
Okay,
Yeah.
both processes. Well, the first step, which is managing the estate, where it should go,
Yeah.
depends on the size of the estate, because the legal practitioner is entitled to 3.5% plus VAT. So the bigger the estate
of
the estate,
250 threshold.
so it's 250 plus. Remember, 250 is a letter of authority.
Yes.
There's no need to have a legal practitioner.
But when you go
above, it's to 3.5% plus VAT of the value of the estate. Now, typically, the value of the estate in the township houses that come to us is about the house value. There, as I said, there isn't much significant. Occasionally, there's a car, there's furniture in the house, there's there's a few things, but it doesn't come. And usually, the deeds office says, "Well, let's just look at the house, unless you've got other assets you're going to declare, like a car." And they go for the rateable value. So they look at the municipal bill, and the rateable value is an approximation of the commercial value. We know it's not exact. So they would look at that. So, but obviously, if your house is worth 500,000 rand, then you're going to pay 3.5% of that. So you're going to pay, if you're going to pay approximately 13,000 for a house valued at 250,000. It's not going to be quite double, because some costs like advertising don't increase of the size of the estate. But you're starting. If you double the value to 500,000 rand, you're moving towards, let's say, from 13,000, you're moving to 20 plus thousand. And that's only to do it. The next stage is the actual conveyancing. We haven't actually changed the title deed from one person's name to another. All we've done is that we've said, by law, each will go to this person. Now you have to get a conveyancer, a specialised legal practitioner, not your right. We can't do it here in Lawyers for Human Rights, because we don't have conveyancers. You have to do another set of exams to be a conveyancer. Now, conveyancers, they can charge whatever they feel is appropriate. They're not linked to this 3.5% of the estate.
Okay.
But if you go,
that discretion.
Yes, but if you go on, you can go onto the websites of these conveyancers, and they'll actually say that they also do it by the value of the house. They'll charge more to convey a larger house, and they have their scales. So if we're just talking about that notional house of 250,000, you're talking about at least probably, and it depends on the legal practitioner, the conveyancer, of another 15,000 to actually transfer the title deed. So you're talking about pushing towards 30,000 rand for a house of value of 250,000.
It's very concerning, especially when you're looking at the communities that have these issues.
I mean, look, that's a very important point. In other communities, people have other assets. So when they die, there is money in the bank, for example, and that would be used.
And what happens when a family cannot afford these fees?
Well, we know what happens. They don't do anything.
So they're stuck.
Well, they're stuck, and we're stuck, because they are stuck. They don't actually have finality around whose house this is. And this, of course, can continue generation after generation, and it leads to complications within the family, because when there's a dispute over the use of the house, it's harder and harder, because nobody owns it. No living person owns it, right? But we all lose out, because the system of registration of property in the country increasingly doesn't reflect the reality. The idea of the ghost house, right?
It goes back to the ghost house.
Exactly. And it's not just for the sake of that we want to know. The collection of rates becomes a problem, because rates are supposed to be levied against the owner of the property. And as I say in the article, it bleeds out into other things. So the current registration of spaza shops, which is quite a hot topic at the moment for many reasons. The deadline's today. We're going to see what. Obviously, anyway, that's just another issue. One of the key aspects of registration differs by municipality, is that you have to have permission. You either are the owner of the property or you have permission from the owner of the property. Now we have the owner of the property is long dead. How is the spaza shop manager or whatever going to get permission from a dead person?
What you're saying is very interesting, because we all know that, you know, the spaza shops in communities are inside of this kind of properties.
Right. So you have to have a letter from the owner of that property.
Okay.
Now the owner's dead. What are you going to do?
The spaza shops.
Well, you're going to forge some letter, or you can't get registration.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to illustrate is there's things that you would never anticipate. That once this system starts to have, let's say, dark areas it bleeds into other parts of our social regulatory systems. So that's why I say we all lose. It's not simply that the family is left unable to get their affairs in order, and I say that it's unfortunately in these situations.
And this is a big problem. How did you start to conceptualize this kind of
from people coming in, and then
from the law clinic?
In the law clinic in Farnborough, that can happen here in Pretoria, or anywhere else where there's an advice capacity, some kind of a walk-in capacity, and it was a bit of a learning curve for me, because you start off okay. They come in, they say, my parent died, and we want to sort things out. So you take a family history, you try and work out if is there a will. Usually there isn't, unfortunately. Yeah. So then you're trying to work out under intestate law who would be the beneficiaries. And then you say, well, let's look at the rates bill. And then you look at it and your heart sinks, because it's over 250,000. And we'll talk about how common that is maybe a bit in a while. So you say to them, well, unfortunately, you're going to have to go to the deeds office. And you're going to have to ask for a letter of executorship. No, so we send them off, and now they come back with this letter that says, you're going to have to appoint a lawyer to manage this. And we go back to our law school textbooks, and you know what the charge is. And then you say to them, well, you're going to have to find this money to do this, but just remember that even after that, there's another bill coming if you want to transfer it. And you know what happens. Yeah. They look at you and they say,
we don't have the money.
Where will we get that money from?
Yeah.
And so you get to this very uncomfortable...
That's the reason why they come to the advice office.
Well, yes, they came to try and sort things out.
Yeah.
There may be many reasons why they want to sort things out, but they came to want to sort things out. Yeah. And so you get to this very uncomfortable situation where if the interest of your client is what you are supposed to be pursuing, you get to the point when they first come in where you actually say, well, I'm going to explain to you what the process is. But you know full well that your advice at the end of that, having talked to the client, might be, I'm sorry, but you may not as well not waste your time even starting this process, because you're not going to finish it. I mean, obviously it depends on the circumstances of the family, but typically yes. So you get to the point where you as a lawyer are saying, actually, it's your own best interests are not to do this and to have to live with the fact that this house remains in the name of a dead person, unless there's some specific reason why that's not tolerable for you. And that's an uncomfortable position for a lawyer to be in, because our job is to, as human rights lawyers, is to assist people to sort things out. What you're actually saying to them is, don't, because you don't have the capacity to do this. Now, we do try and get pro bono lawyers, but to be honest, the pro bono system in this country is very weak. And we manage on some occasions, but only really for the first step, which is to get legal assistance with the letter of executorship. The next hurdle for the conveyancing is you've got to try and get conveyancing lawyers to do pro bono work. Not that easy.
It's not easy.
And the scale, of course, is far outweighs the kind of pro bono availability that is mobilised. If the LPC was more jacked up about enforcing pro bono, then it would alleviate the situation. I don't think it would deal with the structural problem that we've landed with.
So have we tried to see if we can get a pro bono conveyance?
Yeah, no. Briggs McCallum, director of the Orange Farm Advice Centre, is really good on this. He's got his contacts, and we send off applications, and we do manage to get some pro bono lawyers, but only for the first step.
Yes.
So actually, it kind of gets somewhere, but it doesn't transfer the house to the name of the house legally. Yeah.
And what happens in the first few processes where, obviously, when a family comes and say, you know what, we have this issue, and the first step is to go get a letter of authority or a letter of execution, but there's a dispute
within the family.
Yes, as to who must inherit the house.
Well, often this is very common, and look, we try and sort that out. The best way of sorting it out, of course, is through mediation to get the family to come to an agreement about. I mean, this is the problem with the family house. Remember,
we all know that there's usually that disputes, especially in family houses. Houses.
Well, that's why they come to the advice centre. Often, there is a dispute, and then look. Sometimes people come in; they generally just want to sort it out. Parents died; they want to move forward. In other cases, there's a dispute, and then as you start to unravel the dispute, you realise that this house is. I mean, sometimes we get these properties, and it's like 50 years ago with the it's like nuts. Okay. Maybe not 50, but it's a long time.
It's a really long time.
And we're already on the second generation of non-title holders. Yes. That is quite common. So that and so that's a problem in itself, of course. And the family house, as I said, is a separate matter. I'm trying to pick out this particular problem of the financial barriers to transfer. Yes. But it does present an interesting problem because any conveyancer who's willing to do pro bono work, the first thing they're going to say is, I'm going to take this on if it's a straightforward case in which there's no fighting amongst the families, because I'm not going to get involved in trying to transfer something if people are fighting about who it should be transferred to, right? So, it does have the family house disputes, which we know are epidemic in the townships, actually then does impact into this, even if you're trying to follow a straight route of transferring property from one generation to the next.
So, how can the families prevent the house from being a ghost house?
Well, it's money.
It's money.
I mean, it comes down to the inequalities of our society. These rules work if you've got resources. Because the estate, as I said, typically will have other assets in which can be used for the cost. I mean, that's how it's supposed to come. The lawyer is the lawyer dealing with estate management simply takes his fee or her fee out of the available resources. It's just here that we've only got a house there, so we get this stupid situation where we have to sell the house to transfer the house, right? It doesn't work. So, as I said, you end up, those with experience in the townships start to realise that you may as well tell people from the start, you don't have the resources to do this, so don't start, because you're just going to frustrate yourself and spend some money to get nowhere. Which isn't, as I say, it's not a nice thing to be telling people, but actually it is in their best interest, in the circumstances that we have, for them to manage with that. And then we all suffer, as I said, because the systems now are increasingly unreliable.
And you mentioned something that, I know, during the house being ghost, the municipal bill keeps running.
That's another.
I mean, in the deceased name.
Well, we've got another problem here, right?
In the deceased name.
Yes.
And what happens when a family decide to go out there and collect the resources, and they get to complete the whole process, and then now there's another.
Hold on.
Challenge.
Well, no, you don't complete the process.
Okay.
You cannot transfer a house without the rates bill being settled.
Okay.
So this is a control mechanism to make sure that rates are paid, right?
Okay.
So irrespective of the situation, you cannot get transfer. So your conveyancer will require the funds to pay off any municipal debt. And unfortunately, we know that municipal debts in the township are huge. Now, that's again another matter, right?
Okay.
People are not paying the rates,
Yeah.
but they're clocking up. Even in some cases, now this varies by municipality. In some cases where there's an indigent owner of the house, so they had legal title as a result of transfer from the past, they're indigent, which means that they are exempt from paying the rates portion, and they also get the minimum amount of electricity and so on and so on. But actually, sometimes what's happening is that the municipality is still keeping that unpaid rates ready for when someone comes who can pay this. So it's kind of almost like a deferred payment. As I say, it seems to vary by municipality, but we come across this down in the Val. And so an indigent title deed holder who then dies, the transfer, then we come to the rates thing, which applies to everybody. But suddenly that indigent, let's call it relief, suddenly kicks back in. But to be honest, we're often not, an indigent household, we don't get to that step usually, because you've already got these two steps. Well, you've got the first thing is the letter of the executive if it's over 250,000. Not all houses are over 250,000. Then you've got the conveyancing fee, but the conveyancing fee is not going to actually achieve it until the rates bill is settled.
So what happens when the rate is,
not settled?
it's not settled?
Well, you can't transfer the house.
So, let's reflect a bit. So you would obtain the letter of executive because
It's over 250,000.
250,000, and you then appoint a conveyancer to do the
So
transfer.
hold on. First of all, you appoint a lawyer to manage that letter of executive, and you can't do anything until the master's signed off.
Yes.
Got the report from the lawyer. Usually a lawyer. It can be another professional. I think accountants. I'd have to check that. So then the master signs off on that. Now you've got to convey. He says, yes, we agree. This house is going to go to so and so. Now you get the conveyancing.
Yes.
Okay.
And he requires certain documents such as the municipal rates.
Well, you need rates clearance, as we say.
Rates
You would have rates clearance. Yeah.
Okay. And you find that the rates are over the value of the estate.
Well, it's not so much. That would be quite a bill to run up, because remember, we've got a house that's worth over 250,000 in this situation. That would be quite an achievement to get your rates billed to 250,000. I'm sure some people managed it.
I mean,
It doesn't really matter. The point is, at the size, that's another amount of money that fungible, that liquid form that has to be found.
But then the families would have to clear the municipal bill before they.
Well, somebody has to clear it.
Yeah.
Somebody has to clear it before that could be, the title deed could be transferred into the name of a living person. I mean, let's just put a caveat in here. We do pay rates for good reason.
No, we do.
We're not saying that people should not pay rates, but this adds
But
on
when
to
you
these
think
other
about
things.
it's very costly. Especially for houses that have been
but let's take the rates
long
aside.
time.
Let's say you have already paid your rates up to date.
Yes.
Let's say that. You still got of a house value of 250,000, approaching 30,000 to find from somewhere to get that transfer completed. And of course, if the house is worth more, then you've got more to
pay. And
that's your only asset in the estate.
So, from your side, do you think what kind of reforms we can sort of suggest?
Well, the first thing is around this 250,000 cutoff, because below that, it's much easier. The first step is easier, not the second step, the conveyancing step, but the first step. And so the amount of 250,000 was set, I think, back in 1994, and so it's been changed a couple of times, but if you track it with CPI, consumer price inflation, it's not that far off. So there has been over the years an increase. But the point is that how property values have increased about twice the rate of CPI.
Yes.
So we're kind of pushing down that level in reality into increasingly poorer households. So the obvious reform, and it's an easy one because it's just a ministerial regulation that can be proclaimed. It doesn't have to go. There's no change in the law. The minister has the power to set these figures.
Okay.
So what we've said in the article is that a more realistic figure would be 420,000. Obviously, it might make sense to increase it a bit more than that to anticipate inflation. And so what was quite interesting then, I looked at the rates bills for Orange Farm. Orange Farms falls under the Johannesburg municipality. You can go in and there's a whole database which you can play with. And at the 250,000 limit, about 45, I can't remember the exact figure, let me look it up, 42.5% of houses actually are over that amount. So 4 out of 10 approximately houses have to go to that letter of executorship. And that's of course where we hit this big problem. Below that it's easier on that first step. If you raised it to about 420,000, there would be only 536 houses in Orange Farm. That would be at 3.4% of the houses. And that really indicates how compressed the housing market is, given the nature of townships and how they were built and what's happened. So the first thing is, let's raise that amount. It's less work for lawyers because they don't get into managing estates, but these families can't afford that anyway. My boss is out at the window. We're almost done, I think.
Almost done.
Will you quickly pop in my office? I just need help for something.
Okay. So if we do raise it to 400, you mentioned 400.
Well, if you followed house increases, you would get to the current figure of 420. 420,000. 250.
That kind of reform, will it have an effect on how people obtain letter of authority and executorship?
Because now the rates bill, when we look at the rates bill, or anybody looks at the rates bill, and it's below 420,000, then we say you can go to the magistrate's court,
which is a lot
go to the deceased estates office there, and they will show them this, and as long as you don't have other significant assets in the estate that would raise it above that limit, you can get your letter of authority. Now, that doesn't mean there's no more problems, because we've already talked about letter of authority can be misunderstood as to what that authority that gives.
Yes.
But it would mean that we're saving about 30, well, it depends on the house value, right? Yes. But you're saving that 3.5% plus VAT that doesn't have to be paid by the family members for that house to stay in their possession, and also, but it doesn't solve the problem of the conveyancing.
But it will reduce the cost of the
first step. The first step would be dramatically reduced, because we don't have to involve a lawyer, we don't have to have compulsory advertising and so on. It doesn't touch the second step. Every property to be transferred from one person's name to another has to be done with a conveyancer.
Do you think, solutions to the second step, which is the conveyancing, do you think we can come to?
But we need to radically rethink what we're doing here. We're applying the cadastral system, which works for high income families or people, onto poor sections of the population. And it's a reflection of our inequality, right? And of course, I suppose the most dramatic way of resolving this is that we have a more equal society in which everyone can finance, all families can finance this. That would be the ultimate solution, which we should be moving towards, but we haven't moved in 30 years to reduce inequality. The next less radical, but still very radical step is say we have to rethink the transfer of property. And we have to think of more appropriate ways to transfer property.
Because after I read your article, and I think a lot of people share the same sentiment as me, you get to realize that these regulations and the laws are not accommodative to black people in general.
I think hold on, just slightly caveat that.
Okay.
It doesn't work for poorer families, and we know that race and socioeconomic status are very closely linked in this society.
Yes.
But you just have to make that caveat, because if you're Motsepe, it's fine, right? I mean, you might not like paying all that money to the lawyers, but it's resolvable. So it's not per se about race, but given the link between race and ink or assets, and in particular this history of how we transferred houses from the permit system to households that actually don't have the resources to now transfer it again in the commercial system. This is almost like a monster that's been created, and obviously we didn't think ahead about this, and we now need to think about what we're going to do.
Okay. So, no, we talked a lot. So we're about to close. If there's any key message you want people to take from this discussion, what would it be?
Well, we need to think about the reforms that we do. The transfer of houses from the permit system to title deeds was done as an act of generosity, if you like. You can also see it as patronage, depends on how you look at it.
Yeah.
But we have to think things through. You can't give people a gift which they can't afford to maintain. And so we need to be smarter about our policies. And we need to come back to the point we've just made. We need to rethink about how property, land, houses in particular, are transferred in this country. And it is worth asking, there are reasons why we have a cadastral system and a deeds office, but do they really outweigh the problems this is creating and the very destruction of that system itself, as increasing large parts of the urban areas are no longer accurately recorded in that system?
Okay. And, for people that are listening to this discussion, where can they get more information about this or any legal assistance if they're in such situations?
There's a conundrum here, because on the one hand, if a family really doesn't have that 30,000 rand sloshing around plus money to pay the rates, what am I supposed to say? I have to say to you, well, consider whether you even can start on this journey or not. It's an impenetrable barrier. We will be pushing to reform, first of all, that letter of executorship, letter of authority threshold, which we think could be easily done, but there has to be a much more dramatic rethink about conveyancing.
Yeah.
And let's be clear about this. It's going to be opposed, right?
But
by the conveyancers.
Yes. My follow-up question is, can we sort of, because we know this problem now from your article, can we start to engage the communities and try to see if we can have a call for action where communities really start to question these things and they try to get the reforms that we just spoke about? Because if we say that, if you don't have money, you might as well not start the process, but maybe themselves can start discussing these problems and mobilize and try to have a list of families that have these problems. Maybe that list can give us a clarity in terms of if they keep going to advice offices and keep going to the North clinics and going,
I would start in a different direction. We're talking about the laws and regulations of the country.
Sure.
Who makes those? Parliament, the executive in the sense of regulations.
Yeah.
If we have a government that's the government of the people, and we raise these issues, we should hope to start processes of reform in various ways. I don't see why the community should be expected to mobilize about a problem which its government is responsible for ultimately. I do think we should be mobilizing communities. I honestly don't think this is the issue to mobilize them around. And it comes back to this problem of the family house and the divisions. I mean, we have to face family members evicting other family members around disputes of family house. This is not an issue of social cohesion. And the reason why, or one of the reasons why it's not a matter of social cohesion, is the laws and regulations which are causing the problems.
Yes.
So I think my starting point here was very classical, it's not revolutionary. Lobby the government, talk to the people responsible for laws and so on, get them to see the problem. If the article helps, that's great. and let's get that sorted out.
Yeah.
And then let's move from there.
Okay. My last question is, do you think there's a chance that this will change and be resolved in the near future?
Near future, no. I do think partly, I think, as I said, the 250 division can be quickly done if people are willing to take on that. It's just the ministerial, I mean, it's a letter basically the minister writes and promulgates in the government gazette, boom. And it would have all sorts of interesting ripples, of course, because everyone has to adjust. But the conveyancing costs, no. And the underlying cause of inequality, which of course is at the base of why this particular problem is presented in this way. We haven't done it in 30 years, right, since the end of apartheid. And so we do have to resolve it, but am I optimistic about resolving it anytime soon? No.
Okay. No, thank you so much. I think this discussion was very informative, very interesting. I hope we can have more discussions like this. That's, there's updates and, there's further discussions and further consultation with communities. And we get to come back to the discussion and give updates to the people that will be listening to us, our religious followers, and people who will be following the update of the article and this discussion. But thank you so much. It's been an honor and hope to see you soon.
Great. Well, we have a very extensive program here in London Housing. This is just one small component of the problems around the urban housing, and we're just talking about urban housing. So yes, indeed, I'm sure there's going to be much more to talk about.
And if people want to engage, where can they find you?
They can find me here at London Housing.
Okay.
Yeah.
At Lawyers for Human Rights.
At Lawyers for Human Rights. When I'm with London Housing, I'm here in Pretoria. I also have other responsibilities in different parts of LHR.
Okay. Now, thank you so much. We'll share the number of the Lawyers for Human Rights Pretoria, and that's where they'll find you. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks.
Bye.